Welcome back to the gospel. And man, it is a wonderful week to be a sports fan. We finally have our inaugural college football playoff bracket. We're going to break it down, give our opinions. Did they get it right? Which matchups are we most looking forward to? All of that good stuff. We had some games that went down over the weekend in the wonderful world of the NFL that I kind of want to get my guy's opinion on. And we're going to break that all down for you. I'm your host, Zay, the fantasy football fiend himself. And I have my guy, BK Wins. Holla at the people, BK.
Hey y'all.
Hey, quick shout out to my guy, Young Vander, the Fantasy Nostradamus. Prayers up for him and his family. They had some bereavement going on in the family, so prayers up for them. He will be back to us ASAP. But let's
Yeah, I
go
just
ahead.
wanted I just wanted to echo that real quick. Say thoughts and prayers to Vander's family. So sorry to hear that this happened for sure.
Let's go ahead and jump into the NFL. There are a few games that I looked at and I said to myself, maybe this is telling for the future. Maybe this was happenstance. Maybe teams have gotten enough tape on other teams that we can kind of now make them look the way that maybe they would have looked previously because they were kind of newly put together, namely the Atlanta Falcons. They had quite a streak going there for a minute. They just got beat again. This was a 42-21 beat down by the Vikings. Kirk Cousins continues to turn the ball over, and it's starting to feel as if other teams have gotten the feel for the Falcons, and that's not turning out too well. They were first in the division. Now Tampa Bay is back on top after their win this weekend. Where are we as far as the Vikings are concerned? And then where are we as far as Atlanta is concerned?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to talk about both those teams per your question and also add in a bonus Buccaneers viewpoint as well. Start with the Falcons. You go back a month ago when the Falcons got absolutely embarrassed in Mile High against Denver. They got blown out, and Cousins was awful. And early in the year, he was awful against the Steelers, and we kind of overlook that because the Steelers' defense is so terrific. You're like, well, they make a lot of people look bad. So and it was early in the year. It's kind of the preseason, regular season that we talk about. So I like they're still in preseason mode because they don't play in preseason, but it's a regular season game that counts. For those of you who don't know what I mean by that, I'll kind of explain that a little. But he's played bad 3 times, I think, in the last 4 weeks now, and like really bad. He's been a turnover machine, and a guy with his experience, you would think would be able to rein in the turnovers better than he has because he's seen all the defenses, he's played all the games. The Falcons are in trouble, and the only reason why I wanted to squeak in the Bucks comment is, Atlanta in the offseason went all in with their acquisitions. They did everything they could to try to they recognized the situation for them, did everything they can to go all in, and they've really struggled the last month, much like Cousins. They've struggled, whereas the Bucks, they were able to tread water without Evans and Godwin. They're two big playmakers, and they're 7-6 in first place. Like, they get a lot of credit for being able to navigate a difficult time without their two of their best players. And as far as the Vikings go, the Vikings, unfortunately for them, are in the wrong division because the Packers and the Lions are really, really, really good. And I don't think the Vikings are quite there. They're well coached. Their defense is really good. But for me, the problem with the Vikings is Darnold, right? The first 3 weeks, 2 of the 3 weeks, he was terrific. He was awesome. We talked about on the show whether he was going to get an extension or not, and so we talked about all that. And then when we sit there and we talk about now Darnold this week, He threw for 5 touchdowns. He was efficient. He was awesome. He needs to be somewhere in between the mediocre quarterback he's been for most of the year and the superstar quarterback he was for those 3 or 4 games where he was terrific. If he's just good, doesn't need to be great or awesome. If he's just good, this Vikings team is scary good.
They definitely have a stout defense. They have the playmakers. They just can't have turnovers. And whether that be from the quarterback position or whether it be from the running back position, which we've seen Aaron Jones, lead the ball on the field a few times there as well. But they are set up to be able to do some damage if things fall their way. The Bears lose again. This is a 38-13 loss to the injury-riddled 49ers. And at this point, it feels like the Bears are starting to bear again. We started out the season with some high hopes, thinking that things were a little bit different than the norm that we've seen from Chicago. Now it feels like we're going to end the season with Chicago doing Chicago-type things. They have I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of, 5-6 games, a losing streak now. And it looks like the quarterback, Caleb Williams, is regressing. I don't exactly know what's going on in that locker room. They definitely have talent on the team on both the defensive and the offensive ends, but this just doesn't look very good at all. This isn't your 49ers team of old where you'd be like, well, yeah, what did you think was going to happen against the 49ers? This isn't that team. This 49ers team probably won't make the playoffs as it currently stands. So lose to that team 38-13, it's not good at all. And I kind of feel like Chicago is back where they started, and I don't know that there's an easy fix in the pathway for the Bears. What's your outlook right now on that situation?
Yeah, so the Bears front office started this process by foolishly taking Caleb Williams instead of Jaden Daniels. We've talked about this. You, me, and Vander have pointed out countless times the mistake that they made and the blessing it is for Washington. And I thank you. I'll send all the GM plenty of Christmas presents and holiday cheer for screwing up the draft yet again. But, the head coach lost the locker room. We heard Eberflus, had people talked about he'd lost it. It was an angry locker room, kind of a toxic culture, all those things. And, in college, Zay, you and I talk about this all the time where teams lose a game, and once they lose a game after an undefeated streak, they go on a long losing streak. We'll use Pitt, for example. They started out 7-0. They finally lost. They lost the last 5 to finish 7-5. You watch BYU lose their last 2 games. Iowa State lost 2 games after being undefeated. So this happens all the time in college ball. While teams will let a big game beat them multiple times, Navy lost 3 games, so after the Notre Dame beat down that they got. So I say all that to say that I don't think the Bears ever emotionally recovered. They were 4-2, had a big game against Washington. They blew the game on the Hail Mary and the miracle at Landover, whatever you want to call it. And ever since they literally fumbled the ball, they haven't recovered since, and now they've lost 6 in a row. And it's like emotionally they couldn't recover from that deficit, because being 5-2 after a win like that, and now 4-3 and losing that game is a swing. And I know that they're pros and they're trained athletes and they know the deal and they know how to handle adversity, and it's a long season and all the cliches. But the Bears are a mess because their front office is terrible. We don't know who their head coach is going to be for the future moving forward. And the other part is Caleb Williams. We had Mahomes and CJ Stroud reach out to him, try to give him kind of like little brother coaching advice and mentor him. And he's like, no, I'm good. dude, all you have to do is turn on the tape and know Caleb Williams isn't good. Like, and so, in fact, he's so bad, he's not watchable unless it's a drinking game. Then he's great. But outside of that, you're sloshed at the end of the first quarter. So I'm just saying that for me, the Bears need to blow it up. The front office is a problem. They need a head coach who has actually viable experience, kind of like a Jim Harbaugh per se. Not that I'm saying he's going there, but somebody who won big time at San Francisco. He's had success in the NFL, or another coach who's had success in the NFL. They need somebody, Mike Vrabel, for example, somebody with experience there that's had success. But the quarterback's a problem, and ultimately, he's not the answer. What do you agree, disagree? Like, how do you feel
No,
about that?
I completely agree, but I also feel like they could have probably had Jim Harbaugh, but they weren't interested because they wanted to keep Matt Eberflus. So yeah, this is why we can't have nice things. They were in pole position to have a guy who has been a quarterback whisperer, who was a quarterback that knows the trials and tribulations, if you will, that a rookie would have to go through and would have been able to kind of coach him through that. Eberflus has no experience in that vein. And to go from having a failing season with him to having a guy who's proven on every level in every stop that he's been in that he's a winner, it didn't take him years to fix the Chargers. They're a winning team right now. They're a playoff team right now. This is one of the quickest fixes in NFL history of a team going from not making the playoffs consistently to being in immediately after a change of head coach and not much else. Right. So again, for the Bears fans, I'm sorry, but your front office is why you can't have nice things. Even though I will say Poles has done some nice things there as far as the GM is concerned, but there have been some areas of some large areas of opportunity. I'll put it that way. The Seahawks take over the NFC West, beating Arizona 30-18. The Seahawks are one of those teams that people don't really pay a whole lot of attention to, but they've been playing a pretty good brand of ball and figuring out a way to win, even when big pieces of that team aren't at 100% as far as health is concerned. So I'm liking what I'm seeing from the Seahawks. I'm liking the grit that I see. I'm liking them being able to kind of change things up from being a pass first to a run first, or vice versa, just depending on the strength and weakness of the team that they happen to be going up against. But do you think that this is a fluke, that Seattle is running the division, happenstance, or are they legit just the best team in that division?
So I think, so like we've talked about all year, the best and most talented team in that division is still by a landslide the 49ers. But the problem is they can't stay healthy. A lot of their top players have had injuries up and down the lineup. You know, yep. Purdy's hurt again. They're missing defensive players. Their first and second string running back are out for the year. Like, this team,
Trent Williams.
It just had a ton of injury issues. But what I'll say is,
Brandon Ayuk.
This has been a much more competitive division as a result than I think anyone thought. Remember, Seattle finished 9-8 the last 2 years. So they're currently 8-5 now, 7-5. So I know they're in first place, but the Rams are breathing down their neck at 7-6 after an upset over the Bills at home, where they ran the ball great and played a really good game. The Cardinals were right there for a while. A couple weeks ago, they were in the hunt, and they've kind of regressed. But so Seattle doesn't beat themselves. And the other thing that I really like about this team is they win the games they're supposed to.
Yeah.
And that sounds really simple to say until you watch all these teams in the NFL blow games that they shouldn't, and they don't do that, which is why they're in first place. They've been able to successfully navigate injuries better than other teams, and they win the games they're supposed to. Give them credit. They deserve a lot of credit for what they're doing. And I think the reason why they're under the radar is for two reasons. The sexier teams are the 49ers and the Rams. They're the more glamorous teams to watch. Seattle doesn't really do anything that wows you. And to be honest, they're not really a fun or aesthetically pleasing team to watch, but they win. And at the end of the day, that's what you're paid to do. They win. And so I give them a lot of credit.
You brought up the other team that's going to kind of round out the NFL segment before we hop into college, but you can never count out the Rams. They beat the Bills, who some have as their favorite, well, one of the favorites in the AFC, but they beat that team 44-42. No defense anywhere to be found, but they can score with just about anybody unless you have playmakers at specific positions on the field that can kind of interrupt what they do with their pass game and running game, and pass game out of the backfield at that. But this was one of those games that I was just like, wow, like whoever ends up with the ball last is going to win this game. But the Rams really showed me that you can't count them out, and that if they do kind of sneak in the back door as far as the playoffs are concerned, they could mess around and end up catching fire and end up being one of those Giants type teams that came out of nowhere that everyone knew that they had pieces, but they just weren't checking for them based on other games that they've kind of let slip early in the season. But you have a great running game, ridiculous pass game. They just kind of have to catch up on the defensive side. We got to remember, they just lost what could be considered the greatest defensive player, arguably speaking, in NFL history with Aaron Donald. So they're kind of coming back from that. And then they also lost one of the better cornerbacks in the game with Ramsey going over to Miami. So they've lost some big pieces on defense, and they're still trying to almost overcompensate on offense for what they don't have on defense. But man, what they have on offense is more than enough to take out any team on any given Sunday. So what's your thoughts on the Rams and also on the Bills? With the Bills, Josh Allen is basically having to be Superman. Can Superman wear a cape for 8 weeks? Or does kryptonite catch him somewhere and we end up seeing a little bit more from the Bills that we have seen, which is you're right there, but not quite close enough?
Yeah, I think so. For the Rams, Sean McVay is a solid head coach. He's a proven winner. He knows what he's doing and has had a lot of success. Stafford being healthy is a huge thing. Nakua and Cooper Kupp playing, huge difference. And they were able to run the ball. Like, the Bills had no answer. They couldn't stop the run. They couldn't stop the pass. And that's just a recipe for disaster trying to play defense when you can't stop anything. I mean, look, Josh Allen, you score 42 points in any game, you should win that 100% of the time. So no one's putting this one on him. He was terrific, and the whole offense was terrific. The defense was the one that kind of fell asleep. But I think in this case, I think it was more about give the Rams credit for playing a great game. They played one of their best and most complete games of the season, and they needed to. The Bills are really good. As far as, is it things to come for the Bills? Well, I mean, they already have the division one. They're on cruise control the rest of the way. So I don't know necessarily it matters at this point for them other than just staying healthy. With 3 losses now, I don't think there's any path for them to have home field advantage, so that's going to be a challenge for them. But the Rams are a dangerous team, to your point, and I still think the Bills are the second best team in the AFC behind the Chiefs. I haven't seen anything that changed my mind.
Not mad at that. I'm just to see how injury will kind of rear its ugly head as it always does as we go down the stretch. But let's go ahead and move on over. I am waiting with bated breath to see how you feel about this college football playoff bracket. We'll go through the rankings first, and then kind of go from there. But the teams that made it in: number 1, Oregon; number 2, Georgia; number 3, Boise State; number 4, Arizona State; number 5, Texas; number 6, Penn State; number 7, Notre Dame; number 8, Ohio State; number 9, Texas; number 10, Indy; number 11, SMU; number 12, Clemson. And then the 2 that were on the outside looking in, you had Miami and Alabama at 13 and 14 on the outside looking in there. Before we get into the matchups, let's start with, did the right teams get in? And then let's get into, are the rankings where they should be? And then we'll talk a little bit about the matchups.
So first, the committee definitely got it right. I think the one concern I had, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, but for me, I'm convinced, having watched the SMU Clemson, by the way, the one best bet out of all of them that didn't win this week, that was unfortunate. They will be getting some hate mail from me this week. But nevertheless, had SMU gotten beaten handily like it was looking like for 2 quarters and 2.5 quarters of that game, if Clemson would have finished them off by double digits, 10, 14, 17, 24, I'd say 14 or more, I truly believe that Bama would have been in the playoffs and SMU would have played their way out of it. But when they showed the heart they did and played like champions and fought all the way back from 17 down to lose on a buzzer beater at the end on that long field goal, I think they earned a lot of respect across the country and proved to people that they can play the game. And they were deserving of the fact that they made the playoffs. So I thought the committee got that right. As far as the argument for Bama at 13 and Miami at 14, here's the thing. You and I have been talking about this for a while. Bama's not a playoff team. They don't pass the eye test. I understand that everyone sees the helmet and says, oh, it's Bama. And it's like there's some birthright that they belong there. But they didn't deserve the playoff last year, and they certainly didn't belong in the playoff this year. And both years proved what I'm saying is true, because they got bounced in the semifinals to Michigan and didn't look great in doing it. And then they didn't make the playoff this year. South Carolina had a terrific year, but before the year, we didn't even know the coach was going to keep his job. So the fact that you went 9-3 is a terrific year, and you're bringing back a bunch of talent next year. The future is bright for Gamecock country. And Ole Miss lost 3 games too, including an awful loss at home against a marginal, actually below average Kentucky team who hadn't won in Oxford since 1978. So, like, you lose to a 4-win team that again, they got it right. As the seeding part goes, to be honest, you might be able to nitpick a little bit of the seeds, but overall, and I can't believe I'm going to say this in a sentence, so I hope y'all are sitting down. I thought the committee did a great job. I'm good with what they did.
This is why I refuse to hop into the arguments of the week to week what the heck are they doing conversation. I honestly like our sentiments are spot on, BK. I feel like they have the teams that should be in the playoffs correct. I do feel like there should be a little bit of jostling, if you will, as far as the seedings are concerned. I would personally say for the entrance of continuity and consistency, Clemson should actually be number 5. I think that they're the worst of the teams that won their conference. But if you win your conference, you should be top 5. Like the top 5 conferences are automatic bids, and the automatic bids should be the top 5 seeds. This has nothing to do with whether I feel Clemson is better than several teams that would be ranked behind them, because I don't. But if the first domino to fall is you have to win, or excuse me, not have to win, but everyone that wins their conference championship has an automatic bid, then that bid should come with an automatic seed with rankings between those top 5. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's funny because I thought about that too, and I can kind of see it from both sides. Given the fact that Clemson was even lucky to be in the ACC game, they had 3 losses. In 2 of the 3 losses, they looked bad. The beatdown by Georgia in the second half, where they got railroaded, and then they got blown out at home by a mediocre Louisville team. So they haven't looked good in particularly playing games against quality competition. They didn't have any quality wins the whole year. They lost to Louisville, they lost to Georgia, they lost to South Carolina. They didn't have any quality wins. So, versus look at how Arizona State's played down the stretch. Boise State was a one-loss team that their only loss was a very, very close loss in Eugene against the Ducks. So Georgia's Georgia, Oregon's Oregon. So
I can't even necessarily say that though, because Georgia's had some struggles. Winning the SEC championship is what put them at number 2, not the year that they've had.
I think 2 things put them there. They're a 2-loss team that beat Texas twice and won the SEC title. So now I agree with you that Georgia's been they're very beatable. And the fact that, although I will tell you, and this wasn't your question, but I'm going to sneak this in there because I'm good at this. I think, again, I want to be clear to the congregation. I never root for any single athlete to ever get hurt. Please understand that. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but it doesn't change my assessment. You've watched Carson Beck be a turnover machine the last month. He's been turning it over 2-3 times a game. He was awful in the first half against Texas. He had 53 yards. The fact that he got hurt is literally what led to Georgia winning that game. Had he played that whole game, I don't think Georgia wins that game. So,
well, which again goes into, if we're going to go by what you've done through the year and not if you're actually the second best team, then I don't know that. Okay. If Clemson beat SMU and won the ACC championship, but then still ends up behind SMU in the playoff bracket, how is the championship the most important attribute when grading teams to be in the playoffs, which, according to what we've read, is supposed to be the most important as far as the committee is concerned?
So I'm going to smirk a little bit here because Clemson coming into the ACC title game was 17. Mm-hmm. SMU was 8. Mm-hmm. SMU's a 1-loss team. They lost a tough game at home against BYU, who also is a really good team. Clemson is a 3-loss team with no quality wins the whole year until they beat SMU. So I say that to say that you're literally not saying you specifically, but with the argument out there, you're asking a 3-loss team to jump a 2-loss team who barely won the game on a neutral field. It still has one more loss and has no quality wins. Jumping 9 spots to me is a big ask.
I get it. Only if it wasn't clear prior to the season that if you win your conference, you're supposed to, or at least what my understanding was, is if you win your conference, you're supposed to be a top. I mean, everyone else that won their conference was one of the top seeds. Even when looking at, I mean, did Boise State play much better competition than Clemson?
So I think the thing that helps, so there's the thing that helps Boise and hurts Clemson. Boise was, now that they won the conference title, they're a 12-1 conference champion when their only loss was a one-score game at Oregon, in a game they very easily should have and could have won. They outplayed them in that game. They didn't finish the deal. There's no moral victories. That's on them. But I say that to say that Clemson, the other thing that hurts Clemson is the same thing, the reason why my favorite team, the Noles, got, I think, screwed last year. The conference. When you play in a pedestrian conference, it's the worst rated conference of these major conferences. Think about it. Miami's a 2-loss team that everyone knows. Well, they technically had 2, really had 4, because the officials jobbed Vodtech in the 1. And in the ACC after dark, Miami escaped a 3-touchdown fourth quarter deficit to survive by a point at Cal, the same Cal team that lost to Florida State. So
Agreed.
I'm just saying that Clemson, in my mind, and I'm not saying that you're saying this, but if I was a Clemson fan upset, I would say you should thank your lucky stars that Miami choked against Syracuse, that you're even in the ACC title game, which gave you the chance to win the title, give you credit that you did win the title, but be happy you made the playoff and not care about your seeding.
I 100% agree with that statement, BK. I'm just saying, in the interest of continuity, if championships are the number one thing, and I just beat you, I probably shouldn't be behind you because you don't have a championship, and I just beat you. Regardless of what's happened before, it's always been my understanding that when we get to playoff time, when we get to postseason, no matter what sport we're talking about, we're 0-0. And for my money, once you get into championship, once you get to the championship games for college, you're 0-0. Like, that's the playoffs have started essentially. You're 0-0. You won the championship. Maybe it took you all year to get right. Maybe it did. But for where you are right now, you went into that championship game saying, hey, whoever comes out on top is the big dog in this conference. And to still be behind the team that you beat because they beat somebody else, it'd be different. It'd be different if they played each other week 13 and it was just another win over another ACC team. But they won the championship. They gotta account for something. Like, if I beat you when the lights are the brightest, I can't still not be better than you. Like, I just, that don't go for me. Now, a couple of other seeds here. I'm going to tell you something that I don't necessarily agree with. I don't know that Ohio State should be number 8. I'm looking at, and maybe I'm in my feelings. I'll put that out there, no problem. But I'm looking at a SMU now, and again, please don't hear what I'm not saying, good people. I have common sense. I know sports, but this is supposed to be a different paradigm, if you will. College football is supposed to be kind of doing a different thing, if you will, right? So when you got a school like SMU that only lost one game until they got to the championship, and now they're number 11, and Ohio State lost two games and didn't make it to a championship to lose, I kind of got to put the team that made it to a championship to lose higher than the one that never made it there. That's the Tennessees of the world, the Ohio States of the world. I would probably put them over. I would put them over Indy as well. Texas made it to the championship, lost to Georgia. Penn State made it to the championship, lost to the number one seed, Oregon. But other than that, they have the best record and made it to a championship and barely lost. And you're now number 11. I just, at the end of the day, everyone's going to get their shot. And this year, it doesn't matter who they put you against. If you lose, and no one's going to cry you a river. In past years, it would have been like, dang, I wish we would have been able to see them play against somebody else because they might have beat somebody else. We don't have that in college this year. Nick Saban is gone. The days of your third string being better than most teams' first string is gone because everybody's first string is getting NIL deals. So I don't care about being the backup to the backup's backup in Alabama when I can go play in TCU and get some Texas money just for showing up to school. Like we're in a different place now, right? But I do believe the committee got it right as far as the teams that made it. There's a little bit of griping that can be done as far as the seeds are concerned. But at the end of the day, I can't be too bad. Got to find something to complain about or it wouldn't be sports. But I can't be too bad.
That part.
Now, with that being said, what matchups are you looking forward to the most? And there are a couple matchups for me that I think I'm looking forward to more than most other people will be. And I'll explain that in just a second. But go ahead and throw that out there, BK.
So I think in the first round, I think there's a lot of nuances here. You know, Tennessee traveling to Columbus and potentially a weather game in December. Like, how cool is that? You know, and is Coach Day officially coaching for his job? Does a loss officially seal his fate? You and I have thought so for a while. We would have already made the decision, but here we are. So we'll see what the time off does and what they do with the home game. But the game that I'm really curious about in the first round is SMU traveling to Penn State. I can't wait to see that Pony Express offense go to Happy Valley in the cold and probably snow. For sure, cold, maybe snow, but I would love to see that offense, which is a lot of fun, go against that Nittany Lion defense on the road in December. I think those are the two games that really have caught my eye in the first round.
I really wish that we were going up against the SEC team that actually has warm weather year round. Tennessee is in the South, but it gets cold in Tennessee. Like it's not Bama or Florida or whatever the case may be. But here's the nuance in that matchup that I'm looking forward to. If the seeding was different and we were going up against, let's say, Texas, I think we could lose and Ryan Day not lose his job. If you lose to Tennessee, which is a good, not great SEC team, that changes everything. Going against your Georgias, your Alabamas, even Texas that kind of came out of nowhere, okay, cool. Losing to Tennessee and Miami in the same year when it wasn't their year cannot be tolerated. It just can't be. Somebody better pull 36 million out there behind and pay that buyout so we can get somebody else in there to do the job. Like this is the you know how most people normally say blessing and curse. No, this is the blessing and the blessing. Either we win and move on and attempt to get revenge against Oregon, or we lose and we win anyway because we have a new coach. Either way you slice it, I'm happy to see what happens in that game. The game I'm not looking forward to at all, to be honest with you, in the first round. I don't really care about Texas and Clemson. I'm just not up for it. I feel like there are two teams that both are currently, and I know I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth right now. I understand it. I'll explain. I actually believe both teams are overrated. And I know I just said in the same breath that I thought Clemson should be number 5, not based on how good they are, but based on the circumstance. They won the ACC. Until the ACC is no longer deemed a Power 5 conference, if you win it, you should be in the top 5. Arizona State doesn't have that much to speak on as far as competition in their way to a championship there either. So it's neither here nor there, but that's just my humble opinion there. Honestly, the one that I'm looking forward to the most, and I do want to see the Penn State SMU game, but Indy and Notre Dame. Because Indy is one of those teams that you have people on both sides of the house. You have some people that are saying that this is an Indy team that can stick with just about any other team, and we may have something in the works here that won't be going away anytime soon. But then we also have the school of thought that Notre Dame just kind of fell asleep at the wheel against Northern Iowa. And if not for faltering there, maybe we'd be having a whole different argument of whether you need to actually win a championship to be a top 14. So that's the one that I'm looking forward to the most. But each of the games will be worth the watch. And the second round is going to be like this thing is just setting up to be a phenomenal finish to the first year of the college football playoff. And I, for one, cannot wait. What do you want to say to the people to wrap it up about the playoffs, about the brackets, about upcoming? I remember tomorrow, make sure you guys check out the fantasy show. We'll be giving you some tips and tricks as far as looking forward to the fantasy playoffs. And then on Friday, you have the Gospel Sports Truth podcast, the flagship show with me and BK in your ear again. And we have quite a bit to talk about there as well. Any final thoughts, my guy?
Yeah, just real quick. The committee got it right. Excited for what the playoffs will hold. It's the best time of the year when it comes to the football season. Should be a lot of great matchups. Teams like Arizona State, Boise State, SMU, they're going to get their day on the gridiron to show what they can do. I'm excited to see what they can and will do. They're very deserving playoff teams, and I think what we're also going to see along the way is some upsets that we didn't see coming, and but a heck of a lot of great games. As fans, we all win because we're going to actually. This is a wide open year where there's not a dominant team. I literally think anybody but Clemson literally could win this playoff.
Agreed.
It's not for all of you Clemson fans. I understand that, I like South Carolina and Florida State, love Florida State. It's not a bias thing. It's for what I said earlier. Clemson's a flawed team that has struggled throughout the year. Their only quality win was in the ACC title game. So when you haven't beaten anybody all year, you're really lucky to even get in the title game. You were lucky to hold on and win that game. And your quarterback, despite his gaudy passing touchdown interception ratio, doesn't really do a whole lot to instill confidence in, oh, by the way, you still got Dabo as your coach. who's a great cheerleader and recruiter, terrible X and O coach. So that's the other problem. In most games, you're getting out coached because you got to overcome his limitations. So that's my final thoughts. But it should be a heck of a great show. I can't wait. And all of us get early Christmas presents getting to watch it.
And that wraps it up for the night. Make sure you catch tomorrow's show. For this evening, we are out. And remember, always tell the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
All right, y'all.
Later, y'all.